Now, this is going to be the fourth and final video in my series that basically explores what in the world happened, mainly within the fan base or the way it was perceived, before, during, and now after the Star Wars sequel trilogy. And just to give you a brief recap, in the first part I discussed how, before the sequels even started, there was almost universal excitement for the upcoming trilogy. No one was complaining about how Kathleen Kennedy, a woman obviously, was president of Lucasfilm. Heck, a lot of Star Wars fans probably didn't even know or care who she was a few years ago. All they cared about was good Star Wars movies. There was also virtually no one complaining about a young woman, Daisy Ridley, being cast as the lead of the whole trilogy. The confusion over seeing a black stormtrooper in the first teaser trailer of The Force Awakens was called out as just that for the most part. Confusion. A lot of people just figured, for whatever reason, that all these years later they'd still be using clones of Jango Fett as troopers, and those who did seem to have a genuine problem with it were called out for being, well, actual racists. Not that there was a sizable portion of the fanbase that was racist in itself, which so many want to now claim is the case after the fact. In the next part of the series, I then talked about how the battle between media and fans really kicked off. What were the first shots? And it was how Rey, even before The Force Awakens came out, but especially just after, was being hailed as a feminist icon. That a lot of people who probably really didn't care so much about Star Wars itself really liked the character because all she did was kick butt at every turn in the movie. Which was one of the reasons some fans, of course, didn't like her. They thought she was too powerful, too soon, and needed training, and some started to call her a Mary Sue, which really ticked off the other side. And so people's dislike for the character, and the term they started to brand her, got intentionally conflated with people rejecting the idea of women in Star Wars. In the next part, I then basically talked about the hypocrisy going on, and I'll get even more into that here. I talked about how 15 years earlier, it was just fine to bash the prequels. The media had a field day ripping on those movies, and they certainly weren't chastising fans for doing the same back then, since they were essentially on the same side. That it would be a joke to make any sort of connection from hate for those movies to any type of larger problem with hate or toxicity within the fan base. And along those same lines, though again it was fine for the media to bash the prequels, fans who complain about the sequels today are called anything from entitled to just plain toxic, though I will certainly concede that, yes, some fans can go too far. And in this video, we'll get a little more into those things. We'll talk about how the media really just doesn't understand the real problem some fans have with the new movies, or again, they want to purposely mischaracterize things in order to get clicks on their articles. And probably the easiest way to point out how some critics really don't get why fans were not happy with The Last Jedi or the sequel trilogy in general, is the sheer number of reviews for The Rise of Skywalker that pointed to the abundance of fan service in that film and concluded that the fans who didn't like The Last Jedi were going to be happy with this movie because it gave them everything they wanted. And therein lies the biggest mistake in thinking when it comes to the detractors of The Last Jedi, that they didn't like it because it didn't go exactly how they thought it should go. And look, the truth is, going into that movie, into Episode 8, I think pretty much every fan not only wanted some sort of big mind-bending twist, but they fully expected one, which in itself was maybe a problem. How do you make a great twist when everyone's waiting for one? And most people were expecting that big twist to involve Rey somehow. And really here, the last thing many fans wanted was for it to be completely predictable, especially after The Force Awakens felt like a remake of A New Hope. They were ready for something different. They were waiting for dark and shocking. They were wanting The Empire Strikes Back 2.0. And in the build-up to that movie, there were plenty of articles already comparing the two, and there were many fans who asked that very same question. Could this movie end up being better than Empire? And that talk pretty much exploded after it was announced just a few short weeks before the release of The Last Jedi that Rian Johnson was to create a whole new Star Wars trilogy once the sequels were done. The implication here was that Disney and Lucasfilm must have fully believed that Rian Johnson had created a masterpiece in order to give him a whole trilogy before fans even saw his first effort. And so this news, on top of already expecting big, impossible things really for this movie, in knowing or hoping it was going to answer most of the big mysteries from the previous movie, like who are Rey's parents, who is Snoke, and so on, it created the perfect storm of expectations. Again, people went into The Last Jedi fully believing they were about to have some type of life-altering experience, that it might be the greatest Star Wars movie ever, hands down. And then, for a lot of fans, it not only wasn't, it was the opposite. And look, the simple truth of what happened after The Last Jedi came out and over the course of the next couple of years is that some fans on both sides went way too far. And the media and some associates at Lucasfilm even reacted to those who didn't like the film and tried to lump them all together and labeled them horrible things for the sake of creating news and writing stories. They tried to make it into something far bigger than just Star Wars, and jumped at anything and everything. A perfect example of this is what happened with Kelly Marie Tran when she deleted her Instagram account, and pretty much every major news source on the planet, it seemed like, ran with the story that she had endured months of online harassment. And their only source for this was one tweet from someone called Star Wars Facts. That was it. There was no other source. There was nothing said by the actress herself, no screenshots taken to back up that this had been happening for months. And everyone just sort of ignored the fact that right after getting on social media in the first place, Kelly Marie Tran expressed her apprehension about it. And no, I certainly don't condone anyone who did attack her online, and I'm sure some people did, there's no doubt about it. I myself have gotten plenty of online hate, and I'm a nobody YouTuber, especially when compared to a young woman who starred in a Star Wars movie. I've had plenty of people write full-on essays in the comments sections of my videos telling me why I'm the worst person in the world and that I should stop posting videos and instead just go kill myself, and I'm not joking about that. And you know what I do? I delete and or report them and simply move on with my day. And I'm not saying they don't bother me to some extent or disturb me, but I realize there are some bad individuals in this world, and that there are people who will say the craziest things when they have anonymity, and when they're saying these things to me via a keyboard, and they're across the country or maybe even across the world, and not looking at me and saying these things to my face. And the last thing I would do when I get hate like that is make assumptions about anyone but the person who posted it. If someone who loves The Last Jedi says they hope I die in a fire, which has happened, I don't assume anyone and everyone else who loves that movie feels the same way, or would say the same thing to me. Because I've also had plenty of great conversations or debates with people who really love that movie, and they were quite civil, or at worst rather heated and passionate in their defense, which I can certainly respect and appreciate. And to tread off course for just a second, this might just be the biggest problem in the world today, making assumptions about groups of people based on the actions of the few or the one, or on the flip side, not being able to judge someone or even a character in a movie because they fall into a certain group, or giving immunity to certain people simply based on the group they happen to be a part of. And going along with all this is conflating the critique of a character with the person who played them or the group they fall into. If I say Rose Tico is a terrible Star Wars character, that's almost entirely a criticism against the one who wrote the character, unless I also make a comment about her portrayal of the character. But even still, it's not meant to say anything against Kelly Marie Tran personally, or women, or Asians, or anyone else. And let's be honest here, Rian Johnson has received more hate online and directed at him than probably anyone else associated with The Last Jedi or in the history of Star Wars at this point. Yet no one would make the argument it's because he's a white man. If anything, that fact makes it even more tolerated, it seems. Any articles that address him getting attacked just basically say it's man babies mad that their Space Wizard movie wasn't exactly how they wanted it to be, and that Johnson is applauded then for attacking them back even. Heck, it's almost laughed off when Johnson is the target. They essentially say, look at all these crybabies complaining about a movie, but when it's Kelly Marie Tran, it's look at how racist and sexist all these fans are. When it's the character of Rey, it's because Star Wars fans just don't want women in Star Wars. That's gotta be it. Suddenly it's no longer about the movies, or just being angry about the content of them. Somehow then it has to become something bigger. And once more, I'm not condoning anyone's actions here. I certainly don't condone those who personally attacked anyone. I'm only saying here that the actions of those who did that only reflect those people. And in the wake of The Last Jedi, this whole crazy narrative arose about how the fan base was entitled and toxic and all that. And it's amusing to read articles from people who clearly aren't the biggest Star Wars fans in the world, telling Star Wars fans why and how they should love Star Wars, or why they didn't like a certain movie. And again, it became very clear how little some critics truly understood fans when The Rise of Skywalker came out, and they started saying that fans, especially those who didn't like The Last Jedi, would love this movie, and then of course a lot of them didn't. And why is that? Well, because fans don't like blatant fan service. They don't want generic plots and meaningless stories. And the reason why they didn't like The Last Jedi or some of its characters wasn't because it was different or not exactly what they expected, but because they thought it was a bad Star Wars movie, that it didn't make sense as Part 8 of 9, and it didn't set anything up or build anticipation for Episode 9. And you can of course completely disagree with that assessment. That's fine. I have no issue with anybody who loves that movie. But clearly, by the way The Rise of Skywalker turned out, Disney and Lucasfilm agreed that The Last Jedi was a miss, that it wasn't what most fans or average moviegoers want from Star Wars. They swung back in the other direction hard with the Rise of Skywalker, and despite what some in the media want to claim, it wasn't to appease the worst part of the fanbase. It was because they had realized that they didn't have much of a story to tell in 9, and tried to mask that the best they could with in-your-face fan service that, again, almost no fans actually enjoy. And now here we sit after the fact, and it seems to me that most fans were disappointed in one way or another with the sequels. I encounter, or should I say hear from or read, very few fans who were truly and totally happy or satisfied with the sequels. And no, I'm not implying they had to make them perfect, that there was a way to please every single fan on the planet, but there were certainly ways to make it where most fans, by and large, would have enjoyed them, if not loved them. Instead, here we sit several months after the release of The Rise of Skywalker, and the big rumor of the time is that Disney will decanonize them, and I don't see all too many people opposed to that idea. I don't see too much outrage at the thought. And sure, maybe the reason for that is because it seems highly unlikely to ever happen, that people who love the sequels don't even take it seriously, or maybe, just maybe, there's more support for this idea than realized. We also don't really see the media tackling this rumor, though yes, with it being just a rumor, maybe they aren't taking it seriously, that's certainly possible. In fact, we don't hear much from the media at all lately about Star Wars, probably because there's not much of a story in the reaction to The Mandalorian and Season 7 of The Clone Wars. There's no story in fans almost universally loving something. No story in Ahsoka being one of the most popular characters in the franchise, because it doesn't fit with the narrative they painted for years. And so maybe the absolute saddest part about all of this is the fan base was shattered over movies that, in the end, again, I think a lot of fans would agree were flawed in one respect or another. Yes, there were a lot of angry fans, and again, certainly some went too far or droned on about it too long. I'll put myself in that group. But what the media did was put a magnifying glass upon the worst of the worst and insisted they were a bigger problem than they actually were. They tried to make it seem like those who were against The Last Jedi were just terrible people, and they played a huge role in splitting the fan base. And so now we come to the end of this video and series. And originally I had planned to go much more into depth with all of this to make this a longer series that pulled this apart and went into other aspects entirely, but I think I'll just listen to Kylo Ren and let the past die. And that also seems like what Disney and Lucasfilm are doing, at least for now. I've detailed in other videos how they seem to be ignoring the sequels. And sure, maybe someday they will return to them, almost certainly will. Try to reframe them perhaps. Maybe there are plans right now to build context around them to make them better. Maybe we'll even get special editions of them a few years down the road that completely recontextualizes them. Or maybe they will just say, screw it, and decanonize them and try again. Though I do have my doubts about that. Mainly because you can't get those original actors back again. That was a one and done deal. Anyway, I don't know what will ultimately become of the sequels. I don't know how many fans were truly happy with them versus unhappy, though again, the former seems to be outnumbering the latter. I don't know if a decade or two down the road, when this generation grows up, if they'll band together to defend their generation's trilogy. All I know, by the number of projects we now have in development, that Disney isn't giving up on Star Wars yet, not by a long shot. The only question is, will they get it right this time? And even if they do, will the fans who were chased away come back for it? Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to give me your thoughts on anything and everything I had to say in this video, or on this series in general. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.